In the House, it is Daniel Sparks, Senator Sparks from Mississippi District 5, Itawamba, Prentiss, Tishomingo Counties, Chair of Economic and Workforce Development Committee, Vice Chair Judd B., and we thank you for coming in, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good morning, Paul. Good to be with you.
You guys, so far, good summer?
I can't complain. We've been busy a little bit, but that's nothing wrong with that.
Here, I have a quick shot just for you because I heard some little information here. An AI-powered robot dentist just completed its first unsupervised procedure on a live human, finishing a crown replacement in just 15 minutes, which is 8 times faster than a human dentist. Normally, dentists have to schedule at least 2 different appointments to get this job done. The robot dentist is able to finish quickly by following along with a 3D model of the patient's mouth. While the machine hasn't yet been approved by the FDA, a bunch of investment money is being used to perfect the process and keep things rolling. Would you go to a robot dentist?
I tell you, you must be aware of my appointment later this morning to have a crown put on. I'm gonna stick with the humans right now because at least if I squirm or grimace, maybe they can recognize that. I'm not sure if AI can pick that up yet.
The only way I do that is if you could have in your hand the little button with the red thing on it where you can hit it to stop.
That's right.
But then again, if you've got pain, where do you go from that? So I don't know. Man, there are so many things to go. And I want to talk national politics with you a little bit, too, but first of all, on a state basis. And I got this story yesterday. I don't even know if you are aware of this one, but it's from our incredible GRIT team. I've always called them the GRIT team, the Gallup Research Investigated team out there, the squad. United States Department of Agriculture announced that financial assistance payments are being dispersed to farmers across the entire country. A lot of them going to the 2nd District and Benny Thompson's district. The award was issued for Discrimination of Financial Assistance Program. This has been going on for a long time in Congress. They put out about 43,000 awards, more than 23,000, about 54%, were to applicants who had or who have farming or ranching operations. Either they had them or they still have them. They received a total of about $1.9 billion in individual awards, anywhere from $10,000. There were some who got $500,000. Over 20,000 awards, 46% were to applicants who never even farmed, who planned to have farms or ranches, but they did not get the USDA action or they were cleared. They received a total of $101 million. Some individual awards anywhere from $3,500 to $6,000. Majority of the farmers who received the financial assistance located in Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, and some other southern states. And this note is that from some people who were aware of this said Monday of this week that Mississippi banks were running out of money, running out of cash for cashing these checks. So I've never heard that before. $30,000 checks, $40,000 checks. One was a $150,000 check in Franklin County. And the banks in Mississippi, some of them did not have that much cash on hand. In Starkville, the check cashing businesses were apparently completely out of cash, and banks could not supply the demand. And I've never seen that before, never heard of that before. But some of them got anywhere from 30 to 40,000, some 50,000, and one was 150,000, and there's probably more than that. So.
Yeah, as I understand it, and I actually dealt with an estate several years ago that had a claim, and I think it was referred to as black farmers discriminatory claim. And as I recall that, and it has been going on for years,
yes.
You were talking about denials that they look back, and again, it's a federal program, it's going through the USDA, And if they had made those loans, again, if you were trying to go into the farming operation and they felt like that they had been denied it, of course, they may have never farmed, but they didn't have the opportunity. So I understood that. Of course, that's why I'm a big proponent also of community banks. I think that, the people that know you locally in the community have that opportunity, but, the federal government put a program together and then apparently by their own admission, didn't operate it in a non-discriminatory fashion. We've seen this in mortgage lending as well. So it's, it's what makes the compliance business in banking pretty tough. But usually when you look back and see where the fault is, it's not with your local community bank. It's either with a federal government program or with one of the, larger banks.
I looked at this, and when I first read the story, I read the story with the mindset it was the last 10 or 15 years. And then I said, geez, that's a little weird. But this goes back longer than that. And I could see how some of that was a more sensitive thing and more racism back 40 or 50 years ago. But in the last 15 or 20 years, I think most people in the banking area also would have been worried about the feds and some of the rules and regulations that we're tightening up. So one way or the other, a lot of money pouring into the state of Mississippi that most people had no idea. So if the car dealerships and people are paying off loans, congratulations to them. They've got to hit an unexpected lottery there, but wasn't unexpected to them. They've been looking for this for a long, long time. Speaking of money, I do believe, and I had it here somewhere, our latest, what was it, the latest revenue for the month of July, since we're in August, looks pretty good. We have another surplus.
Yeah, we were up a little bit, and again, we're continuing to factor in some of the income tax reductions, corporate tax reductions. So it's good that we're staying on revenue prediction, excuse me. And, of course, reminding everyone, we have to run a balanced budget in the state of Mississippi. That's a requirement. We generally can obligate up to 98% of anticipated revenue because we're going to put 2% generally into the rainy day fund is the expectation. And we have not budgeted every dollar that's anticipated to come in. So when we have a little bit of an excess, obviously, that's good anytime you're over your revenue production or projection, but it's also a good thing in the sense that you don't have all that obligated. So we have some things coming up. Yeah. I think you're going to see unfortunately you're going to see a lick as it refers to Medicaid coming up this year. Some of the changes coming out of the post-COVID environment. Drew Schneider's done a really good job over at Medicaid trying to manage the funds, but it's a very good possibility that they'll come back with a deficit appropriation. You could possibly see one out of MDOC as well from a healthcare standpoint. So I think it's wise not to obligate every dollar you have because you don't know when you're going to have an issue. So we're trying to keep track and hope to see those revenues continue to climb.
Yeah. Nothing you've seen would you think change the mind of a majority of the Senate that we need to take that next step along with the House and the governor as far as personal income tax?
Well, I think, of course, I think the House has a committee they're putting together, and I'll be interested to see what Chairman Lamar's, findings are coming out of that. But at the end of the day, you've got to figure out and decide. And maybe they'll include this in their study committee, but maybe we ought to have a core function of government study committee because that's kind of where you have to start. You look at what are the core functions of government in the state of Mississippi. Well, it's education, it's public safety, it's infrastructure. Those are the three biggies. And, Medicaid jumps in there just because it's such a large item. CPS, DHS, some of the things you have to do. And go back to the federal government. There's so many things where Mississippi gets money from the federal government, and you've got to be in compliance. You've got to put your part up. Yeah. We need to figure out how much we want to spend. Nobody ever talks about spending. We talk about cutting taxes and then maybe hoping the numbers work out. I do want to hear them talk about, how it applies to what our spending side of the equation is.
We got a break coming up. The other thing people don't talk about, and Trey Lamar, thankful to him and several other people, House and Senate, have been mentioning this a little bit more about maybe we do need to take a look at some of those antiquated tax laws that we have in the state of Mississippi. And one of those was brought forth also by a guest, Andy Gibson, on Monday of this week about that unintended consequences as far as some reevaluation on poultry houses. So we'll talk about that more coming up next. we were talking about revenue, et cetera, et cetera. I'll let you continue on your thought process.
Yeah, we were, obviously looking at the situation where how can we put more money back in the hands of the taxpayers and let them spend it. Of course, we've had a hyperinflation environment, continue to have high inflation, interest rates are up, people they need the funds at their disposal. And, when we talk about tax cuts, the unintended consequence piece is that, you cut in one area, are you going to come back and raise it in another area, or is someone going to do that? We've got property taxes. Obviously, a lot of that is a local government issue, ad valorem taxes, inventory taxes. And I think Chairman Lamar has talked a lot about, tax credits, maybe they're on the books. And that's one of the things you got to take into consideration. We have a lot of tax credits, payroll tax credits, that are on the books for economic development projects, and the elimination of the income tax, you're going to have to turn around and write a check back potentially to these employers. So I'm for taxing people less. I'm for trying to find a way for government certainly to operate within its means and do a better job managing the money of the people, because it's not the government's money. They don't create anything. They, take it from people. But part of that is to deliver the core functions of government, and that's where some of the discussion I think needs to be, and you can determine what you can do.
If you were playing the odds on this, would you say that the better chance is going to be on at least a longer dissertation on grocery taxes?
I think you're going to hear a lot about the grocery tax. Number one, it sounds more palatable.
Yeah.
The thing that, and sometimes our friends on the other side of the aisle refer to it as if we decided one day to evilly tax groceries. There's no such thing as a grocery tax. There's a sales tax on goods that you buy. Groceries happen to be one of those. Now, if you want to exempt it, that's a different issue. So, some people, that's the only tax they pay. The other thing a lot of times people don't understand with the grocery tax is they refer to really wanting to help those that maybe are the poorest among us. Mm-hmm. Those that are on SNAP benefits are not paying grocery tax. Those are not taxed. So,
well, another little tidbit of information here is, let me see now, which party imposed that 7% tax?
Well, I think they the last piece of it, I think they overrode Governor Fordyce's veto, if I'm not mistaken.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. So they have ownership of that over the many, many years. What else do you think is going to be the top things to talk about as far as in the 2025 session?
Well, I think
school choice is going to be up there in top three.
I think education, some format, is always going to be at the top of the list. We have a new funding formula that's just going into place. I do think that some of the points of this funding formula were to try to attack some of the things that our friends in public education have said, well, maybe we need to be funded for this or for that. And I think it was good to add money for things like ruralness, heavy poverty, students with disabilities, focus that money on that particular student's needs. But I think choice will continue to be discussed. I think the certificate of need laws are going to be something that we look at.
Yes, yes.
In at least, piecemeal part of it. Delivery of health care, that's part of the equation. You were talking about the AI dentist earlier. I mean, we just deliver medicine differently than we did 25, 30 years ago, and that's only going to continue to accelerate. So, we need to look at that delivery model. I think we will continue to look at, the public safety side of the equation, corrections. I'm actually going to a reentry symposium put on by MDOC later today. That, we look at how we're addressing that, our intervention courts. There's a lot to do every year. And again, sometimes it's not, I'm going to make a new law. It's that I'm going to look at programs that we have existing to see if they're working, to see if they can be improved. We have judicial redistricting that's up this year is a big deal. We've got legislative redistricting potentially based on some of the court cases that have come out. So there's a lot of moving parts for year two of a 4-year term.
Along those lines, certainly in your chairman of economic and workforce development, highways and byways is a big part of that. Are we going to find a continued stream of funding and for the Department of Transportation?
And I think that's a great question that also leads us back to this, tax reform package. Nobody wants to see taxes go up. Nobody wants an increase in taxes, and I understand that. But we are operating off of 1987 gas tax percentages, and automobiles have become more fuel efficient. So we literally are getting less dollars per mile traveled, and then you get into the electric vehicles and things of that nature. So I would like to see a way that we could get a steady stream of revenue, but that is going to be some adjustment to how we generate a gas tax. And I'm not advocating for an increase in the gas tax per se, because, like I said, with the fuel economy and some movement toward electric vehicles, you may be not fixing the problem like you think you are. But we do have to do that from an infrastructure standpoint. Obviously, labor, and the Lieutenant Governor created a select committee on labor force participation, which he has, there's 13 of us on the committee, and he has put me to chair that. We will be meeting in late September, late October. We're looking at our labor force participation rate. We want to make sure we understand where the pockets across the state are that we have issues. We're going to bring in, folks from the Department of Employment Security, accelerate, and we talk about our very low unemployment rate, but then we only have 54% of people in the workforce, and we've got to address disability. We're the number 2 disability state in the country. So that's one of the things, at least for the next probably 3 months, that I'll really be focused on, because if we're going to continue to have these economic development announcements like we've had, and the MDA and the governor's office and folks have done a wonderful job, is we got to have labor.
Can anybody identify how many of those people are actually here in the state that are not working? In other words, we used to figure 40,000. Some of those were probably retired people who decided after COVID not to go back into the workforce. So, or some may have moved away. But how many people do we think we actually have that are employable and maybe are on some type of assistance that they don't need to be on?
And that's one of the things that we want to look at, because we're going to have to use raw numbers, if you will, because I just do not grasp this Bureau of Labor and Statistics survey that they deliver. I've never met anyone who took the survey. Your brother in broadcasting, Gerard Gibbert, it just blows his mind, that we operate on this survey. None of us have ever met anyone that's actually been surveyed. That's why I want to look more at raw numbers, how many Mississippians are working. You've got overflow. We got people that go into Tennessee to work or come into Mississippi to work. Yeah. We want to drill down and actually target pockets. There's unique things that they will be in the Delta region that won't be in Northeast Mississippi. Versus the coast, versus Metro Jackson. One of the big things as far as this labor force is also not losing that 24 to 45-year-old age group. That's kind of the sweet spot, if you will. And to be able to keep our young people in the state of Mississippi, we need a thriving Jackson. We need a good metro area. And I got tickled the other day. A guy said to me, and it was a good point, we don't need 50 or 60-year-old people trying to tell us what 20-year-old people want. So we need to listen.
I think that's been going on since Jitterbug days, though.
That's right. But with what we're seeing with the Capitol Complex District, with Capitol Police, you look at the Fondren area, you look at we got restaurant scene in Jackson.
Yes.
We've got
the building blocks are there, and we just need leadership to think out of the box. You said, talking about the meeting that dealt with transportation, there was a new survey. We got a break coming in here. Let me go out with this one. There was a new survey there that's really got the attention of a lot of people, from manufacturers to everybody else. Where is the EV trend going?
A new study says that nearly half of electric vehicle owners are likely to switch back to gas. That's 46% of U.S. electric vehicle owners are leaning towards switching back to traditional gasoline cars. That's according to the McKinsey & Company survey. Respondents spanning the globe presented a wide range of reasons for switching back, with many saying charging was an issue. 35% cite that public charging infrastructure was not up to par, while 24% stated they could not charge at home, and 21% noted that they worry about charging was just too stressful. For reasons unrelated to charging, 34% reason total cost of ownership were too high because insurance is higher, and 32% cited long distance traveling was impaired by these vehicles. 16% stated that they would have charged mobility requirements, and 13% stated they did not like the driving experience,
Wow.
which I find interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just too quiet.
Well, and we'll take a quick break here, but you've got to figure that if there was no incentive from taxpayers to buy this vehicle, and we helped them buy it, and also the marketplace took care of this, and not Joe Biden, then we'd have less EVs on the road, but more happy people who have them, and that's the progress that the marketplace should be taking.
Are you saying the Biden-Harris administration was wrong on an economic principle?
Man.
Surely not.
Add that to the failure list. We'll talk more about that coming up. Well, let's see. We got the lieutenant governor. He's thrown his hat in the ring. Shad White's thrown his hat in the ring for governor. A couple of early entries there. You want to go and throw your hat in the ring for governor or lieutenant governor, or you want to wait till after the dentist appointment?
I'll tell you, I'm enjoying serving the good folks in Tishomingo, Etowah, and Prentice County at Senate District 5.
Is that the official statement there?
Well, I'm going to do the job they've elected me to do. You know, that's my goal.
Well, that sounds like a precursor to the another announcement. That's what that sounds like.
Well, I was out in the show, so I enjoy it. I tell you, I like the fair, the heat and the dust and the sawdust and everything else. But it's always interesting. Of course, when it's not a state election year. Now, let me back up. We have some huge elections on the ballot. I have a colleague, Jennifer Branning, running for the Supreme Court in the Central District and other Supreme Court races. Those races are very important in the state of Mississippi. Certainly the top of the ticket this year is a presidential race. But yeah, I think sometimes they have to spice it up a little bit when it's not an election year. So there was some spice down there.
Well, you really can't have. It would be great to have that in the fall of the year, but again, it's so intertwined with football that I mean, you can't have it in the fall.
That's right. Yeah, I think it's set in stone to be in the hottest part of the year and just go out there and enjoy it. But you know, a lot of the discussion down there was on national politics, and you know, we're seeing some things happening.
What's your overview as we switch a little our narrative here on certainly on Walz, because he is under fire right now. We're talking back to the John Kerry days as the Swift boat, and that's gaining steam.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. One is Corey Bush got beat yesterday. Ilhan Omar's up next Tuesday, and Bowman's already been beat. I hope that's a sign that even in liberal districts, even in Democrat-leaning districts, that level of socialism, that level of you know, just not what we look at as American ideals, is taking hold, and maybe they'll take notice, but not the Harris campaign, because they went and chose an individual from the state of Minnesota who's clearly left of most anyone in Mississippi that considers themselves even a conservative Democrat, if you will, if such thing exists. You know, you're talking about the one state that Ronald Reagan didn't win in 1984.
Yeah.
So when everybody says, oh, she's not as extreme as you think she is, oh, yes, she is. She not only doubled down on it, you know, she made a statement. Now, as far as his military circumstances, I try to be careful commenting too much. I didn't serve in the military, so I want to tread lightly there. But I think the facts will show what the facts show. He re-enlisted, my understanding, on a 6-year contract, and was put into a program that raised him to a particular rank if he completed that program.
But he didn't do
and
that.
He didn't complete the program. He withdrew what he knew, what he didn't know.
But he uses that rank in his political agenda to gain political capital.
And that's right, and that's what makes it, you know, in play. But one of the things I hope the Trump campaign does, talk about policy. Get on point. I mean, when we talk about policy and you have these, measurements, I realize in today's, it's not even a 24-hour news cycle anymore. It's about a 24-minute news cycle. People get distracted. So I know some of this has to happen, but we really do need to be talking about policies because
you have a presidential candidate who has been in there now, 18 or 19 days. There has been absolutely nothing. Look, and I don't want to be facetious about this, but from what she has said, what she has done is basically make appearances, said some fluff stuff, taken some applause, and left. We could actually, really, do this. Take a 15-minute recording from her campaign, put a cardboard cutout of Kamala Harris, and it would not be that much difference. She hasn't talked about policy. She hasn't said anything as far as how she's going to improve or keep the border the same. Well, she hasn't said anything about any of that.
And part of it is she's looking at 4 years ago is just stay out of the media sight and maybe things will work out. I think she'll be challenged to do that, but she's going to get a smooth sailing at least through the end of the convention. Yes. I thought it was interesting yesterday, the hecklers in her crowd were pro-Hamas folks or pro-Palestine folks, and that was the first time she got off script was to kind of chirp at them. And that just tells you where we are. I mean, you've got Hezbollah now joining in some of the fight over in the Middle East along with Hamas, and the Democratic Party can't figure out which side they're on. Yeah, and that's just tough.
She makes one little Biachi statement, and the media are fawning all over her like, there, she is going to be a great leader after saying one thing.
You know what? If you want Donald Trump to win, then say that, otherwise I'm speaking.
That was it.
That's it.
That was it. That's out of script.
Well, I'll go ahead and say it. I do want him to win. I know people are frustrated with him, but in your listening audience and outside of your listening audience, people in your listening audience, their family, you need to talk to them about, and we need to talk to one another about policies that are out there. I wish the president or former president would do some things differently. Sure, I do. But you've got to bear in mind, the Democratic Party lied to us for months about Joe Biden's health and about his abilities. Kamala Harris would be liar number one in that group because she would work closely with him, we would assume. They did not have a primary. They ran everybody out to protect Biden, telling us how good he was. Now they have anointed and appointed. So, my friends on the left side of the aisle who talk about democracy and voting and all the different things that are important to them are literally supporting something much worse. And they project back on former President Trump that, he's going to do these things if he gets elected. Well, you know what you can look at? You can look at his first term. In his first term, we had a good economy. You remember President Obama talking about the magic wand and GDP and manufacturing jobs, and then he had to eat those words because those things actually happened on the Trump administration. We didn't end up in foreign entanglements. We were an energy producer. We should be pumping this liquefied natural gas over to Europe and not letting Russia get that revenue. We should be energy independent in this country. We should not be lowering our strategic oil reserves. All these things that have happened. And you go back to the EV thing. When you try to push the market, you usually don't end up with good results. But the key thing for us as a country is to be energy independent, to be regulatory friendly to business. And with the Chevron deference case coming out, we've got a great opportunity with a Trump administration to put this economy in a great position.
You think all those people that you see behind her at the podium care about that?
No. It's clearly a power grab because I'll be honest with you. I'm not impressed with her body of work. If you go back to what she did as a DA to what she did as Attorney General and a senator, her positions are the opposite. And one of the things I would take note of, anyone who is really running with this ticket, particularly with Walz on board now and him being very much, with the Minnesota legislation that I'm not a fan of, is you look at someone who wants to run as a moderate Democrat in the future. If they're out there pushing the Harris-Walz ticket, and then later they want to come back and say, "Oh, I'm a conservative or I'm a moderate." No, you're not. You're supporting the most left-leaning socialistic ticket in my lifetime.
By the way, Joe Biden is headed to Wilmington a little bit later on this morning in Air Force One to thank his campaign staff for their work. So he'll apparently let them go because they're doing about as much work as he is as far as the campaign. You said something, and I was talking to Lance about this before we signed on this morning. It is remarkable, so remarkable, and I don't think people understand this historic statistic in the two people who are running to be the leader of our country. One from the very first day, if you think about this, when he announced he's been maligned, prosecuted, persecuted, impeached, indicted, investigated, belittled, fined, convicted, lied about, the source and target of unimaginable disinformation, spied on by our own agencies out there. We just have that information 24 hours ago. Betrayed by the country's intelligence agencies, cheated out of votes, shot in an assassination attempt. Those are the things that he has given up in his commitment to serve this country. Now, turn the page. What did the other one do?
At this point, I don't know of any accomplishments that.
Well, not only that, how did she get here to that position? There was nobody. The only votes from the citizens during the primary, she didn't get enough.
That's painful. It's painful to look. If you go back and look at even what she did 4 years ago, there are a number of people who've gotten delegates. They wouldn't let Kennedy on the ballot. They didn't want him in the Democratic Party because at some point they knew probably that Biden would be exposed. But it's not a good sign in this country to plug in a candidate. That's just.
I'm going to give you a final segment when we come up here. We'll do that one. But real quick, here is the statement that is hanging heavy over Governor Walz at this particular time.
We can make sure we don't have reciprocal carry among states, and we can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
Wow. He never went to war. There is a penalty of jail for doing something like that. Of course, he'll never see that. Back with more coming up next.
We can make sure we don't have reciprocal carry among states, and we can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
That is one of the many times that he's talked about his bravery and everything else. And there is another story that is probably number one in the Minnesota media this morning. It's a guy named Sergeant Kyle Miller, Minnesota National Guard. Hometown was Wilmer, Minnesota. He was 19 years old, and he was a soldier in that division that was supposed to be a platoon. He was supposed to be guided by his leader, Walz. He was killed by an IED in deployment in that same one that Tim Walz was supposed to be there. So that is making news in his hometown and across the state of Minnesota. So. All right, final thoughts, sir, from the one and only senator from District 5, Daniel Sparks.
Well, I think it's imperative in state government that looking at what's going on at the national level, I certainly will be voting for President Trump and encourage everyone to do the same because of what we've talked about, the principles, economic principles to values, things across the line. But state government is becoming more and more important, and I think states are recognizing how this country was founded and that it was a united group of states and that states have those opportunities to make decisions for their people. And, Governor Walz has made those decisions in Minnesota, and they're decisions that I don't agree with, from what transgender care to abortion laws, things that he champions, and his pivot in trying to talk about his military service was to gun control. That was the whole point. He wanted to talk about, I know guns because I've served in the military. So there's not anything in his repertoire, in Vice President Harris's repertoire that encourages me at all. And I hope people can wake up to that and get out of the politics of personality. But at the state level, we got to take care of our business no matter who's elected. But even at a more local level, families raise your kids to where they can have a strong foundation, a principled foundation. You know, whatever high school or college you send them to, you need to raise them in a way that you expect your message to stick with them in your church. Be active. It's more important now than ever to give that foundation. We have so many children that struggle, that are in CPS care, that are in foster care, that don't have that. So the more impact that we can make on people to understand that failure is something that happens. Effort is something that's necessary. It's not the participation trophy generation. We really have to get away from that, or we're going to suffer the consequences of it. You can ignore principles, you can ignore economic principles, but that doesn't mean they won't apply. You can look at our inflation, you can look at our interest rates, you can look at the behaviors. You know, some of the biggest problems we have right now is probably the access that children, young people have to information they don't need to be dealt with. Yeah. Well, who's that gatekeeper? You hope it's their parents. You hope it's a strong family unit, but we've got to do that. Otherwise, we're treating symptoms of the problem. The problem is a breakdown of the home, of the family, and of a foundational principle, bedrock, in my opinion, in understanding that there's a bigger purpose to be on this earth than me running for office, and that deals with somebody's eternal life.
Yeah, I just want to squeeze in here what you said, because one of the things that we need to teach these kids, included in the conversation, is, and I know it's oversimplification, but the major difference, one of the biggest differences in both of these political parties, and you don't see that when you're in that juvenile status, and liberalism goes with youth. But after you start paying taxes and have a family, it's a whole different picture out there. And one of the things that differs this administration with the other administration, whether it's Reagan or Trump, is the principles of the Republican Party is just leave the states alone. Let the government, the federal government, do as little as they have to do. Get out of their lives, leave the people alone, let them prosper, let them use this incredible machine we have of a republic and capitalism and to achieve the American dream. Get out of their way. Stop putting on rules and regulations and trying to control their lives.
And people make determinations of where they want to live based on that, based on tax policy, based on maybe policy that deals with the social issues of the day. But that is this great experiment in this republic, not this democracy, this constitutional republic of which states have rights that they have not asserted. And the federal government, if it's not specifically given to them, it's reserved to the states. And I think we're going to see more of that now. I hope we see a second Trump presidency and we move in the right direction.
If we don't, we have to move somewhere else in the right direction.
Like I said, other countries, state government becomes even more important. Well, hey, I will say this: no matter who's in that White House, there's not a country I would trade to go to. You look around; you don't have to look far to see the poorest among us have it better in this country than the best in some other places.
Good luck on the dentist appointment, and thank you for coming in, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Let's get an update on news. Fox and SuperTalk News coming up next.